But how interesting was that Information Wars episode with Nicholas Fuentes just streamed on Rumble? I thought it was super interesting how Alex Jones, he really wanted to change the subject when they started talking about JD Vance, who's the current vice president of the United States of America. And it was so interesting, the dynamic between the two. It seems like Alex Jones, he was trying to use a little bit of chutzpah, no pun intended, to kind of manipulate Nick to cutting him off constantly and then changing the subject and using this anecdotal, how the fuck do you say that word? Anecdotal humor to just really get him in this chummy mateship to kind of build this connection, because obviously Nick is a little bit lonely, and I think Alex Jones, he's a master at controlling conversations, and Nicholas Fuentes is obviously an expert as well, but he also views Alex like a father figure, and he obviously really looks up to these alphas like Alex Jones, particularly because not only is Alex much older and pretty strong, he's also very good with women, and he's got to a point where he's not only is he controversial, but he's also loved. And Nick, he's only got a very specific fan base, people from the age of 16 to 40. And maybe he has some boomers, but they don't really understand him. I mean, I don't understand a lot of his says. He's much smarter than I am, but I probably understand about 70%. It's just obviously a lot of the names about the American politicians I don't really have any relevance to. But I like to keep an eye on Nick, because he notices some things, and I just feel like I could learn from him in terms of just his encyclopedia level knowledge of things. But getting back to the issue on track, is that Alex Jones, I feel like Nick is right when he says that JD Vance is being groomed to be the next president, and one of his primary objectives is to strengthen the relationship with India because of the feminism in the Western countries like Australia and the United States. People aren't having kids, and so they need to bring in the labor. And they were pretty strong with China, but China seems to be growing in their level of Christianity, and so they're actually more in moral similarity. They tried this movement, the Asian Lives Matter, but it didn't really stick because Asians aren't victims. They're definitely, from even the people I see who are white supremacists, even they have respect for Asians, like Japanese in particular, and Chinese and Korean, because they don't cry over spilt milk. Same as the Irish as well. A couple of people do online, but and even the Ukrainians. My wife's Ukrainian. In the 1930s, her people, millions of them, were dying of starvation, and there was a bit of cannibalism. But I don't hear any Ukrainians talking about that. They're not complaining that millions of us were genocided and starved to death. And it was very tricky because obviously Stalin, he was kind of, I'm not sure who was the leader in the 30s. I think it's irrelevant. But yeah, it's just really interesting about JD Vance that they not only did they have a break, which Alex said at the end of the episode, that people always accuse me of having breaks, but they're timed, they're there before. But it's just ginger juice. It doesn't explain the fact that when they come back from break, they completely change the topic. And I think Nick was a little bit soft on Alex. I think because Alex, I was going back to him, he is a wizard when it comes to being dominant in conversation and, making friends with the people so that they don't want to be as gung-ho, as boisterous as they normally would be. But obviously he's on home ground as well, because people forget that the things they're talking about, like Alex Jones and Nicholas Fuentes, these guys, they're tackling really tough subjects, and it's even more difficult than playing football. And like, you know how in football you have a home and away situation. Like when you're at home, you have an advantage. And Alex Jones was in his studio, you know, he's in his hometown. He didn't just travel, so he was obviously more upbeat. But I found like there was a bit of kiss ass scene, no? Like I feel like they weren't being genuine. It was an interesting interview, interesting podcast, but I would have liked to. I feel like people need to be kind of a little bit fatigued sometimes in order to see the real version of themselves. Like maybe they should like talk for 3 hours, or you know, just do push-ups for an hour first and then start the podcast, so that they're a little snappy, a little bit more raw, instead of just being so polished and like